Girid Bharatari Yashodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girid Bharatari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girid Bharatari Yashodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girid Bharatari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girid Bharatari Yashodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Prajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Gaur Premanande. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paribrajak Acharya Ashtatara Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Shikoho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Mayapur Dham Ki Ganga Maya Yamuna Maya Ki Tosi Maharani Bhakti Devi Ki Yuga Dharma Harinam Sankirtan Ki. Most auspicious Avirbhav Mahotsava Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Prabhupada Ki. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories Sri Guru Sri Gauranga, all glories Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So today being the appearance day of His Divine Grace Srimad Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, we will speak about his life and his mission. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurunmilitan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Karun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Nitamscha Hey Krishna Karana Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasade Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So it was in the year 1874 at this time that Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati made his appearance in this world. He was born in the holy place, Jagannath Puri. Those of you who have been to Jagannath Puri, you must have seen the birthplace, because there's a Gaudiya Math temple there today. Initially, of course, Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati appeared in the family of the personality we know as Bhakti Vighna Thakur. At that time, Bhakti Vighna Thakur was the magistrate in the district of Jagannath Puri, and he was given a residence there just on the main road between the temple of Lord Jagannath and the Gundicha temple, where Jagannath goes every year. So it was at that place Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati appeared, and initially he was given the name Bhimo Prasad, the mercy of Bimala. And Bimala is named for Lord Shiva's wife. So Bhimala Prasad appeared, I think he was the third, or either the third or the fourth son of Srila Bhakti Vighna Thakur, who had a large family. Bhakti Vighna Thakur had 11 children. He wanted all of his children to help him in propagating the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he trained them like that. So Bhimo Prasad, at the time of his birth, it was noted that when he came from the womb of his mother, the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck like a Brahmana thread. So that was an auspicious sign. And then some months later, at the time of the Rath Yatra, the Rath Yatra car came past their home, and Bhakti Vighna Thakur's wife, Bhagavati, she took the opportunity to bring the child onto the chariot of Lord Jagannath, and she placed the baby at the feet of Lord Jagannath to get blessings It's a custom. When we go on Rath Yatras in different parts of the world, people who may have a very young child, they may pass the child onto the chariot to put the baby at the feet of the deity to give blessings to the child. So when Bhimo Prasad was placed at the feet of the deity, it was noted that a garland of flowers fell off onto the child. So that was another very auspicious omen, indicating that this is a special child. Then, later on, as the child began to grow, when he was only a few years old, his father had brought some mangoes to be offered to the family deity. But before they could be offered, the child had eaten some of the mangoes. And so when the father came and saw that some of the mangoes had been honored by the child without offering, then he mildly rebuked the child and told, "Oh, you have taken before it was offered to Krishna." He told the child, "This is an offense." And so when the child heard like that, he made the vow that in the future I will not accept mangoes. And throughout his whole life, he did not accept mangoes. And whenever sometimes the devotees would bring mango, of course here in Bengal, there's a lot of mangoes, and they can be very nice, very tasty. So people would bring mangoes. Prabhupada said mango is the king of fruits. But when they would bring to Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, he would say, "No, I cannot take. I am an offender." So this was his determination. From childhood, he showed his staunch determination for the service of the Lord. So the young child grew up to be a very dear child to his father. He became his personal secretary, because Bhakti Vinod Thakur was not only a magistrate, but he was also a great devotee, and he was a preacher, and he was writing books, and he wrote many wonderful songs and poems, which we take the benefit of today. So Bhakti Sidhhanta, or Bhimo Prasad at that time, he would help his father. And he would, of course there was no computers or anything, everything was handwritten. And he would help his father to keep these different notes and the different writings and poems which he'd done. And at the same time, he would also be reading and studying himself. When his father would go traveling, Bhimo Prasad would go with him, and he would take the opportunity to research the different religious traditions. So Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur encouraged his son. He said, "You know, I'm your seminal father. You have to get initiation from somebody. You have to, I cannot give you initiation. You have to take initiation from someone." So it was arranged. He said, there's actually Bhimo Prasad had no desire to take initiation, because he had so much faith in his own father, that his own father was a spotless, pure devotee, a very great devotee. We see Bhakti Vinod Thakur. The title Thakur is given to very, very elevated, pure devotees. So he was serving his father, but his father wanted him to get initiation. So who to take initiation from? Because there were so many sahajyas. There were so many people who were not presenting the proper message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who were just simply deviating and creating disturbance. There was one person, when Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur and Bhimo Prasad were in Jagannath Puri at that time, there was one Babaji who used to come, and he would listen to the lectures of Bhimo Prasad. That Bhimo Prasad would give lectures in those days on the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So there was this one Babaji coming, and they thought, well, Babaji's nice. But then later on, they found out what the Babaji was teaching, and they were shocked. They found out the Babaji was telling his followers, don't chant Hare Krishna out loud. Just chant it in your mind. And he gave them another mantra to chant, a mantra which he had made himself. He'd made up a mantra, and the mantra was completely nonsense. It was rasabas, and it was against the teachings of the scriptures. But he popularized this mantra because he himself was a popular Babaji, known to the people, and he had followers, and he told them, no, we don't chant the name of the Lord. The name of the Lord is pure. We will just chant in our mind Hare Krishna mantra. He told them like that. And he wanted them to chant this mantra which he had. And then he did another deviation which he had also. He introduced a thing which is known as Saki Beki. Saki Beki. It means taking on the dress of the Sakis, of the gopis. So he would have men dress up as gopis. And then he would tell them, oh, you are Lalita Saki. Like this, and the man was actually a conditioned soul. But he's saying, oh, now I'm Lalita Saki. And it was completely nonsense. Nowhere did we find this in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or the Goswamis. So Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati preached very strongly against this. And of course Bhakti Vighna Thakur also, they pointed out that this is a deviation. And they gave evidence also that Rupa Goswami has written in the Chaitanya Astakam that Lord Chaitanya loudly chanted the holy name of the Lord. And so Rupa Goswami had personally witnessed the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he had described the activities of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Chaitanya Astakam. And he describes there that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu loudly chants the holy name. And they pointed out to this foolish Babaji that the chanting of the holy name is done in japa and in kirtan. And of the two, kirtan is even more powerful than japa. And they pointed out that no conditioned soul should ever try to imitate eternally liberated souls like the Sakis, like Lalita Saki, who is an expansion of Srimati Radharani. It is just a great offense. But the Babaji would not accept, and he went on propagating his nonsense, and he got followers somehow. So it was very disgusting to Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati and Srila Bhakti Vighna Thakur. So, anyway, Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, he had to get initiation, and it was over here in Mayapur. When Bhakti Vighna Thakur was here in Mayapur, he had made his residence over at Swarupganj, and Gorkishore Das Babaji was coming to visit there. And sometimes he would even stay there because he took Bhakti Vighna Thakur as his Shiksha Guru. Actually, Gorkishore Das Babaji had been initiated as a Babaji by a personality called Bhagavat Das Babaji, who was a direct disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji. So this Gorkishore Das Babaji was coming and hearing from Srila Bhakti Vighna Thakur, and Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati was also present at the time. And Bhakti Vighna Thakur pointed out, he said, this is a very good person, that he will make a good guru for you. Now, the interesting thing is that Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji was almost illiterate. He did not have hardly any education. But still somehow he liked to read. He would try to read Prarthana, which is a book of prayers by Narottam, and he would also read Prema Bhakti Chandrika. These were two books which Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji kept with him. And but he was almost illiterate. You know, he'd never had any formal education. So there, on the other hand, Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati was a great scholar. He was still called Bhima Prasad. He was actually a highly educated person, a great scholar. He had been offered to take the chair at the Calcutta University and to be the professor of astrology, because he was so learned in the science of astrology. And he had written a wonderful commentary on a book called Surya Siddhanta, which is a very important treatise on astrology. So Bhima Prasad was very highly educated, fluent in Bengali and English and Sanskrit. So he was fluent in these very important languages, and he knew all of the Shastras. He'd studied deeply all of the Shastras, because even as a young child, when he was only 7 years old, he already had memorized the whole Bhagavad Gita. And he could not only quote the verses of Bhagavad Gita, but he could explain the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita to people. So he was highly educated. So when he approached Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji for initiation, Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji said, "Oh, no, how I can initiate you? You're such a learned person. Look at me, I'm an uneducated fool. How I can ever become your spiritual master?" Anyway, Srila Bhima Prasad begged him, no, please, I want to get initiation. I realized I've been foolish. I've spent so much time studying all of this worldly knowledge. Actually, Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati was such a learned person. He was called a walking encyclopedia. He could speak on any subject, any topic anybody wanted to bring, he could speak on it and debate with them. He was so learned. And so Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji said, "Look, no, how I can become your spiritual master?" Bhima Prasad said, no, I need to get initiation. You should, please, you have to accept me. So he said, "Well, I will ask Mahaprabhu." So then, after some time, they met again. And so he said, Bhima Prasad again said, "Did you ask Mahaprabhu?" "Oh no, I forgot to ask him." So then he begged, please, I need to get initiation. All right, I will ask. So next time they met, "Did you ask him?" "Well, I asked him, but he did not give me any reply." So then Bhima Prasad became very grave. And he quoted from the song which we sing, Gurudev, Kripa Bindu Diya. How does it go? At the end of the song it says, Karana Haile Gandiya Gandiya Pranana Rakibo Ara. Karana Haile Gandiya Gandiya Pranana Rakibo Ara. That if you are not merciful to me, then I will simply weep and I will not maintain my life any longer. So when Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji heard that he's ready to give up his life, and then he saw Bimal Prasad was shedding tears and crying, feeling himself helpless and really seriously contemplating giving up his life. Then Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji said, all right, go take your bath in the nearby river and come back. And he took bath and came back, and then he initiated him. And he gave him the name Vrishabhanavi Devi Daitaya Das. Vrishabhanavi Devi Daitaya Das, meaning one who is the servant of the lover of Srimati Radharani. Beautiful name, eh? So that was in the year 1900. He was given initiation. At that time he was already 26 years of age, and he had become initiated. So they were preaching. He was with Bhakti Vinod Thakur. He would preach, and he would often give lectures. But he was very aggressive. He was called Simha Guru, Simha Guru, like a lion. He would preach very strongly and very forcefully because he was very unhappy to see all the deviations and all the nonsense which was going on in the name of propagating the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Particularly, he was preaching against like this Babaji. I mentioned how this Babaji was teaching people to do Saki Beki, become a gopi, dress like a Saki, even though you're a conditioned soul, take on the mood of the gopi. The proper mood is take on the mood of Rupa Goswami. You want to do something good, take on the mood of the Goswamis and chant the holy name and study the scriptures. Don't just become sahajyas. Sahajyas mean they take everything very cheap. And they think it's so easy to become a Paramahamsa and to become the liberated souls. Prabhupada often, our own Srila Prabhupada often warned us, be very careful about Radha Kund, because in Radha Kund there are many sahajyas that they take on the dress of Paramahamsas. Paramahamsas give up all the symbols of Varnashram. They take off their Brahmin threads and they cut the Sika and they don't carry the danda, they give up, this is the Babaji, because Babaji means Paramahamsa, that one is actually on the stage of Paramahamsa, the topmost level of devotional service, completely absorbed in service to Krishna through chanting the holy name. So Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, he hadn't taken that name yet. That name actually came when he took sannyas. So sannyas initiation came later. I think it was 1918 when he took sannyas. He took initiation in the year 1900. So he was serving his father still. His father trained him in book publishing, in proofreading, in editing, different things like this. Preparation for his future, that he could go on publishing books, writing books, and even he began publishing a newspaper, a daily newspaper. So Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati was preaching aggressively, and Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur thought it was not very good because it was making some agitation. People were a bit offended. So he told him, he said, for the time being good, you should go to the Yoga Peeth. You go to the Yoga Peeth and do some bhajan there. Chant the holy name. So at that time, Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati came to live here in Mayapur, and he lived near the Yoga Peeth, and he took a vow to chant the holy name 1 billion times. 1 billion times. And in order to do that, he calculated he will have to chant, like Haridas Thakur, 3 lakh names every day. 3 lakh names means 192 rounds every day. And he will have to do it for 9 years. So for a period of 9 years, every day he was chanting 192 rounds. You know, sometimes we do 64 rounds, and when you finish 64 rounds in one day, you go, oh, you know, wow, I did it. You know, you do one day, you think you're really doing well. Could you imagine? 192 rounds every day for 9 years he was doing. Of course, Haridas Thakur was doing every day. But it helps us to understand what was the spiritual position of Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur. That he was such a great soul, that as a young man, he was chanting all these rounds. He took that vow, he was like 30 years of age, 26, and he's chanting. You know, we're very passionate at that time, we're very passionate, we'll run around, we're very active. And that was why Prabhupada engaged so many of the devotees. He engaged us all in book distribution, because he saw our mood, he saw our passion. He knew we couldn't just sit down and chant Hare Krishna. We can't do it. He gave us things to do. Go and build temples. Go open Krishna conscious centers around the world and distribute books. So, Srila Prabhupada, everything according to time and circumstance. So, Prabhupada engaged us in that way. But Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, it was a different time. India was more rural, had not developed so much economically or industrially, although it was coming. And certainly, Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati saw the need to go to the cities to preach. So after completing his vow of chanting 1 billion names, during that time he had acquired some disciples. He had not yet taken sannyas, but he already had some disciples. And he explains it's actually the duty of a Vaishnava to accept disciples. Because without accepting disciples, the line of disciplic succession cannot continue. So Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, even before his sannyasa initiation, he'd already started taking disciples. He took 1914, you had the disappearance of Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. He lost his seminal father, the person who he was most dedicated to. And then in 1915, he lost Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji, his own Diksha Guru. So it was a big loss. He lost both his fathers, the seminal father and the spiritual father. They both departed from the world. But they had both encouraged him to preach. So he was thinking about their desire, and in that mood, he decided that he should take sannyas. However, who to take sannyas from? Because he has no godbrother. Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji initiated only one disciple. He was the only disciple. of Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji. So he has no god brother. There's nobody there to give him sannyas initiation. So how does he take sannyas? So he went to the altar at the temple there, and at Mayapur here. He went inside the altar, closed the curtains, and he sat down in front of the photograph of his own spiritual master. Now I have heard from the Gaudiya Math devotees, one of the Gaudiya Math devotees personally told me, he said he didn't just sit in front of the photo. He said his own spiritual master actually appeared to him in a spiritual form and gave him sannyas and told him, now go and preach. But generally we say he sat in front of the photo of his spiritual master and took sannyas in that way. It was a very special situation because there were no god brothers, there was nobody else there to give him sannyas, so he simply... And why did he take sannyas? We should understand that a person does not accept sannyas just simply out of pride or just simply for recognition. But the mode of accepting sannyas is for service, to do more service for the Supreme Lord. So in that mood, to expand his preaching and to do more service, he accepted the renounced order of life. However, there was always opposition. There was opposition to his initiations. Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, at that time when he took sannyas, he took that name, Sidhhanta Saraswati, and he was giving initiation. And some of the people who were coming for initiation were from Brahmana families, and some were from Sudra families, and he would initiate everyone. But the smarter Brahmins would object. The smarter Brahmins have a long controversy, a long criticism against Vaishnavism. Even in the times of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, just after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we had Vaishnava acharyas like Narottam Das Thakur and also Shyamananda Pandit, Srinivasa Acharya. They were initiating. Now, Shyamananda Pandit was not born in a Brahmana family, but he initiated Rasikananda. Rasikananda was from a Brahmana family, but he accepted Diksha from Shyamananda Pandit, although Shyamananda Pandit was not a Brahmin by birth. But he was a great devotee and he could understand, he's a great devotee. And similarly, Narottam Das Thakur was also not born in a Brahmana family by birth. But he initiated people from Brahmana families, people like Ganga Narayan Chakravarti and Ramakrishna Bhattacharya. They were two prominent disciples of Narottam Das Thakur, and they accepted initiation from him. So there was objection. The smarter Brahmins were complaining. These people, how he can do it? He's not a Brahmin. How can he initiate? How can he do this? They claim that unless you're born in the Brahmana family, you cannot give initiation, and you cannot give Brahmin initiation, and you cannot worship the deity, and you cannot perform sacrifice like doing the yajna, doing the Agnihotri, doing a fire sacrifice. They say this is the work of the Brahmins. Brahmana, and they say Brahmana means Simano Brahman, by birth only. But we argue against this on the basis of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which comes particularly in the case of Sanatana Goswami, who describes that anybody can become a Brahmana if they're properly trained and initiated by a bona fide spiritual teacher. Then what is the qualification of the bona fide spiritual teacher? That also has to be considered. Bona fide spiritual teacher, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught Ramananda Rai, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nasi Shudra Keni Nai Ye Krishna Tadvavet Se Guru Hoy. That it does not matter where you are born. The birth is not the important criterion. What is important is that you have the proper training and temperament for Brahmanical life. And you should know the science of Krishna. Ye Krishna Tadvavet. Krishna Tadva. You have to know the science of Krishna. Then you can become spiritual teacher. It does not matter if you are Sudra or Brahman or renunciate, whatever position you are in the material world. That is not the criterion. But if you know the science of Krishna, then you can give the initiation. And people think, some people think even the Brahman thread, oh, people just wear the Brahman thread, they think they're better than others. But that is not the purpose of the Brahmana thread. The Brahmana thread is given to people to show that they have had the mercy of the lotus feet of a spiritual master. And we chant the Gayatri. Gayatri mantra is recited to remind us that we are eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. Not that we're better than others, but it's to remind us that we are the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. And so these things were not taught. It was Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati who was teaching these to the world so that today people can accept. But at that time there was a lot of opposition. Srila Prabhupada explains, he said, the work of my Guru Maharaj was to challenge the caste Goswamis. Caste Goswamis. They say, unless you're born a Brahmin, you cannot be a Brahmin. They say, the seminal birth is important. We say, no, this is not in the scriptures. It's nowhere in the scriptures. Chatur varnam maya shristam guna karma vibhagasha. Krishna created the divisions of society according to guna and karma, not janma. That is their concoction. That they wanted to take advantage, unfair advantage, and exploit the people. So, Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, in the mood of Bhakti Vighna Thakur and in the mood of the Goswamis of Vrindavan and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he preached against the caste Goswamis, that this is all wrong, that anybody can worship the deity if they're properly trained and initiated. It's not birth which is the criterion. But there were people were challenging. They had parikrama here in Mayapur, and they came at one point to the Ghat, and there was a big procession, many devotees, and even they had a big elephant. And what happened? There was a gang of people, they threw stones on the devotees. They all got pelted with these stones. It was an outrage that they attacked a peaceful demonstration, a peaceful march. The devotees were peacefully performing parikrama and sankirtan, and they got stoned. And then when they came to Vrindavan, when Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati brought his devotees to Vrindavan, all the shopkeepers closed the shops. They didn't want to sell anything to them. They said, you're making Brahmins from people who are not Brahmin. You're letting these Sudras become Brahmins. We don't want to encourage you. We're not selling anything to you. They closed the shops. What to do? They had to go on regardless. They had to tolerate so many of these things to establish the Krishna consciousness movement. And there were people, they said, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is not the Supreme Lord. Why are you worshipping him? He's a devotee. He said himself, he's a devotee. He said, Gopi Bhartu Pada Kamalayor Dasa Dasan. He never said he's the Supreme Lord. How are you putting him on the altar as a god? They challenged like this. They said, where does it say he's God? So Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati had to prove to them. He had to teach them the scriptures. He quoted Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna Varnam Tevishap Krishnam Sango Pangashta Parshadam. Like this, that in the Kali Yuga, the Lord appears, not blackish, Akrishna. He comes in the golden color, and he's performing Sankirtan Yagya. Srila Bhakti said, then they said, well, that's Srimad Bhagavatam, that's Shruti. That's Smriti. Where does it say in the Shruti? We want Shruti, because they're smarter Brahmins, you see. Smarter Brahmins, they don't accept the Smriti. They don't accept Srimad Bhagavatam. They don't accept Bhagavad Gita. They say, where does it say in the Shruti? So Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, he knows all the scriptures. And he quotes from, do you know the Chaitanya Upanishad in the Atharva Veda? And he quoted from the Atharva Veda. Atharva Veda means one of the four Vedas. And in the four Vedas, there's this Chaitanya Upanishad. And he quoted a verse there where Lord Brahma is speaking. And he's saying that, I will tell you a secret. He said, I will appear on the banks of the Jahnavi in the town of Navadvip, and I will give love of God to the world. I will come in my two-armed form, and I will give bhakti to the world. Stated in the Atharva Veda. It's also, there's another verse also in Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Also, there are evidences there. But these rascals, they were saying, no, it's not. They said, look, it's right here. It's in the scriptures. You want Shruti? I'm showing you Shruti. They were defeated. They had no answer. Nobody could reply to his arguments. So in this way, Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, he did so much for us that we can enjoy today, that we have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gaurnitai deities around the world, and we are chanting also Gaura Mantra, Gaura Gayatri Mantra. They said, oh, Gaura Gayatri, no, we shouldn't chant that, it's not Vedic, it's not... But he showed them, no, it's there, it's in the Vedas. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's name is there in the Vedas. And so we're getting the benefit. We chant Gaura Gayatri, we worship Panchatattva and Gaurnitai, all around the world. But there were so many obstacles, there were so many challenges. It was not easy. Just as Srila Prabhupada had to face difficulties to establish the Krishna conscious movement, in the times of Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, the difficulties were even more. And he was preaching mainly in India. Although he did send people to the West, his real preaching was here in India, and he established 64 different centers around India. I think more than 17 of them were here in Mayapur Dham itself. He established 17 centers just here in Navadvip, so that on parikrama the devotees can see these different places and hear the pastimes. So he really did an intense labor. And he was very, very careful to guide his devotees. One interesting lila which takes place is that when the devotees were at the temple of Shakshi Gopal over in Orissa, he saw that his followers, the people who were accompanying on the tour, they were grihastas, and they were not giving any donations to the beggars. They were not giving alms to the beggars. And so later on he spoke about it. He said, you know, to give alms to the beggars is not karmakandi. Some people think that, oh, this is karmakandi activity, just some pious activity to give donations, to give charity to the poor people, to the less fortunate people. He said, they're also part of God's family. And of course they may be in difficult times, they're poverty-stricken, but it's a duty of all devotees to have compassion, and to those who are well-to-do, that they should try to help the less fortunate people by giving charity. So sometimes, you know, people criticize it, oh, this is welfare this is just karmakandi activity. But Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, it said, especially when you come in a holy place and the people who are there sitting outside the temples, you should try to give some kind of charity. Those of you who are well-to-do, you know, don't be miserly. He said, if you don't give charity, then you don't want to give to Krishna ultimately. You don't give to the parts and parcels of Krishna, and you won't give to Krishna either. You just keep it for your own self. You just keep your wealth for your own self. So he didn't want that. He wanted to encourage that the people, devotees, should be kind-hearted and charitable, give donations, feed the poor. Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, actually there was another time when there was a famine. There was a famine, and they asked, the government had approached him for money, and he told them, no, he wouldn't give any. He said, he wouldn't give money for the government. He said, no, we have to use our funds for our temples, maintaining the temples. But Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati was revolutionary. Another thing which he did was, he would wear sewn cloth. Now previously, sannyasis would never wear any sewn cloth. They would simply wrap a piece of cloth around them. But he would go to meet different people. At the time he was preaching, India was under the rule of the British. So he would go to the important people, British people, and he wanted to dress respectably, and he put on a kurta and sewn cloth. And in this way he went to see them. He didn't go barefooted. You know, sannyasis, tradition, they would walk everywhere barefooted, but he would wear shoes, and he would go to meet these British people. And he even had a car, and he would go in his car to go to see these different people. And he would preach to them, and he would get them to come out to Mayapur, all the way from Calcutta. Now, I remember coming out to Mayapur in the 1970s, and I remember what it was like then, 50 years ago. It was no picnic, you know. The roads were really poor, really, really bad, difficult the whole way. And you could imagine 100 and more years ago, what it must have been like. Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati was here, and he was getting people, British people, to come out to Mayapur to see. And not just any ordinary people, but very important people with big positions in the government. He'd get them to come out to Mayapur, and then he would show them the maps, and he would establish the actual birthplace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is here in Mayapur. So that was very important work which he was doing. And he was encouraging the principle given by Rupa Goswami, which is Yukta Vairagya. Yukta Vairagya, not just Falgu Vairagya, not just false renunciation, but renunciation in relation to Krishna. To use everything in the service of Krishna. That is Yukta Vairagya. Just like we're using this technology to here today. It's all, you could say this is materialistic. We're using these material things, but we are using them in the service of Krishna. And that is encouraged by Rupa Goswami. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagya Uchate. Srila Rupa Goswami has described for us that actual renunciation is utilizing everything in the service of Lord Krishna. So Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, he did that. He utilized everything for the service of Krishna. And particularly he was fond of the printing press, which he called the Brihat Madanga, for printing books, because the book would go all over the world. Bhakti Vighna Thakur, his father, had sent books to Canada in 1896. 1896, he had sent books to Canada, and devotees went in the 1960s and they found the books which Bhakti Vighna Thakur had sent. They went to McGill University in Canada, in Toronto. They found the books which had been sent there. So book distribution, very important, very powerful. Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati liked so much to see books. And when people wrote articles, he would simply see how many times the word Krishna appeared there. And if the word Krishna was there many times, print it. That was the important thing. He liked to see the word Krishna there. And the daily newspaper was there. And people were going, if they would sell even 1 or 2 newspapers, they would collect a few paisa. He would glorify them. Very good, you've done very well. He didn't like them just to go to the rich people. If somebody came back with big money, he said, no, this is not very good. You didn't go to poor people, you only go to the rich people. He encouraged, go everywhere. You come back, if you bring some rice, a little rice, a few vegetables, and some money as well, oh, very good, you've done very nice. He liked the devotees to do that kind of preaching. This was the mood of the Gaudiya Math. In those days, that was 1920s, right? He established the Gaudiya Math. We know our own founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada, he got initiation. Well, he first met Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati 100 years ago this year, 1922. So there's a very big program today in Calcutta, at the same place where Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati met Srila Prabhupada. Because Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, he was brought to Calcutta and they were arranging programs, and it was at number 1 Uttadanga Junction Road. And now that property is property of ISKCON. And today there's a very big function there. A number of many senior devotees from the movement from around the world have come, and there's a very big program taking place at Uttadanga Road. And later on, when you get the opportunity to go to Calcutta, you must go and see that place. Because it was there that Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati was preaching, and our Abai Prabhu, at that time, he was still a grihasta, still a householder, married man with young children, and he came there, and immediately he walked in the door, and Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati saw this Abai, and with his friend, he said, "You're a nice young man. Why don't you preach the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the world?" Immediately, and Prabhupada, it was a shock, you know. But at that time, Prabhupada describes, he was a follower of Gandhi, so he was in his Gandhi followers, the Khadi cloth, and he would say, well, our country's not independent yet. We first have to get independence, and then we can spread Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. But Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati argued back, no, you are wrong. The message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu cannot wait for some political adjustment. So, Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati powerfully argued and defeated all of Bhaktivedanta Swami's arguments and told him, you should take this up. So Prabhupada describes, he said, I was impressed. He said, I was deeply impressed. But at that time, he said, I was a young man, I had young children, I could not do anything. But later on, he had moved to Allahabad, and it was the year 1933, and the Gaudiya Math was spreading. 1922, Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati had just began preaching, but then they moved around India, the open centers, and they came to Allahabad, and they made a center there. Allahabad today is called Prayagraj. And Prabhupada had a business there called Prayag Pharmacy. And the Gaudiya Math devotees came there, and we said, we heard you're a pious man, you're a religious man, and we're opening a temple here. We wanted to tell you, we wanted you to help us, to support us. And then Prabhupada remembered how he had met Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati. And 1933 he got initiation. Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati gave him first and second initiation. And at that time also he told him that he should study very carefully the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which later on Prabhupada wrote as the Nectar of Devotion. So that was 1933. 1936, we have the disappearance of Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur. So our founder Acharya tells us he only met his spiritual master 4 or 5 times, but he never forgot his instructions. And instructions like, if you ever get money, use it to print books. Very important. So Prabhupada did that when he went to America. Whatever money he got, he would print books. He didn't worry too much about temples. In Prabhupada's time, we opened Vrindavan. Vrindavan temple was opened. And then Bombay was opened. But Mayapur, Prabhupada told Ambarish Prabhu that this is your project. You should develop Mayapur. So we have today the temple coming up under Ambarish Prabhu. He donated the main donor for the construction of the Mayapur project. But Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, he wanted that the devotees should all work together to push on Krishna consciousness. When doctors would tell him, don't preach so much, you're putting more strain on your heart. He said, what's the purpose of living if I cannot preach? He said, better to have Hari Bhajan and poor health than good health and no Hari Bhajan. So he was never on the material platform, and he actually departed from the world in Calcutta at the Gaudiya Math temple, Bag Bazar temple, which is a very nice building which was opened in the time of Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati. So he departed from the world there. At that time he was he had the devotees sing the song Sri Rupa Manjari Padma. It was a favorite song of Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati. He liked to hear it. And interesting, he had the devotee sing the song. The devotee who sang the song was not really the best kirtanier. But Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati considered that his mood of devotion was the best. So he was not so much concerned with the musical presentation, but the devotional presentation meant more to him. So he departed from the world there in Calcutta, and then later on, a few days later, they brought his body out from Calcutta. They brought his body out here to Mayapur and was placed in Samadhi down the road where we see it today. So this is some brief incidents from the life of Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati and his mission. He is the pioneer. Certainly he took on, we say Bhakti Vighna Thakur is a pioneer of preaching Krishna consciousness in the Western world. And Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati continued following in that mood of Bhakti Vighna Thakur, sending people to foreign countries. They went to Burma. At that time, Bangladesh was still part of India, so that regularly people were going to Bangladesh. He wanted so much to see Krishna consciousness spread around the world, and we hope that somehow the efforts which were going on today are pleasing to him. Are there any questions? Yes, Prabhu?
Just like in ISKCON, we have the systematic study of Shastra, Bhakti Shastra, Bhakti Vighna. Similarly, did Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur also initiate something like that?
Yes, right. That's right, yes. Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati also had this program. The devotees study the Shastra. You can see, if you get Bhakti Vikasi's book about Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati, you can see there, they've got some of the questions which were there for the Bhakti Shastri students. Yes, Prabhu?
Thank you so much for this wonderful class on Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Goswami. Maharaj, as you see the parampara altars, so from Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Goswami, we see that saffron cloth robes being worn by the whosoever taking up this preaching mission rightly.
The disciplic succession?
Yes.
On the altar? Well, the disciplic succession on the altar is based on shiksha, not on diksha. And that was how Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati arranged it like that. That he put the picture of Jagannath Das Babaji and then Bhakti Vighna Thakur. Now Bhakti Vighna Thakur was initiated by another person, right? But it was Jagannath Das Babaji who was his Shiksha Guru. And when Bhakti Vighna Thakur established the Yoga Peeth, it was Jagannath Das Babaji who'd come there to confirm that this is actually the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So you could say that the disciplic succession on the altar is to remind us that shiksha is more important than diksha. That while diksha is necessary, that shiksha is even more important. And again, the relationship between Bhakti Vighna Thakur and Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji is not diksha, but it is shiksha.
So is it from Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Goswami, but he took that sannyas initiation directly from his Guru Maharaj. So from that day only he took up that saffron robes, saffron cloths. Previously it was white robes in the form of Babaji dress.
Can you tell me what he's saying?
After he took sannyas, at that time he wore the
Saffron.
Yes. After he took sannyas, then he put saffron on. Yes. When he first got initiation from Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji, we never heard anything about him putting on saffron. But certainly when he became sannyasi, then he would put on saffron. Now, wearing saffron cloth was a privilege which was given to brahmacharis for the purpose of preaching. That it will help them to go out and preach, that people will give more respect if they see you in the saffron cloth. They will think, they'll think of you like a sannyasi almost, you see. Even though you're brahmachari, but because you wear saffron, they will give you more honor and respect. Because they have that tradition, that's understood. You wear saffron cloth, that means you're practicing celibacy, you're a brahmachari or something, so they'll give you honor and respect. So it's good for preaching. It's meant to be as an opportunity to help in preaching. Huh?
Sidhhanta Saraswati Prabhupada established Daivik Varnashram Dharma.
Yes, yes, certainly. He took sannyas, right? Sannyas is also Varnashram Dharma, part of that. He didn't try to become Paramahamsa. Although Bhakti Vinod Thakur and Gorkishore Das Babaji, they were Paramahamsas. They'd taken Babaji initiation, but he didn't want to put himself on their level. And he showed the example of humility, perfect humility. Although he was initiating people, he never thought himself to be the master and the controller. He said, if one thinks, I am Guru, then you're actually Garu. Garu means cow. You're not Guru, you're Garu. It means you're not a spiritual teacher, you're just a stupid cow. So if you think like that, then you're Garu. So, and when he would see disciples, and they would, if they offered obeisances, he would also offer obeisances, and he would always say, Dasosmi, I am your servant. And he would think like that the disciples are all sent by my spiritual master just to help me. And we saw that also from our own Srila Prabhupada. He said that you're all sent by my spiritual master to help me.
Thank you, Maharaj, for your nice class. Dandavat Pranam. Maharaj, next month Navadvip Dham Parikrama is coming, and you participated and you led a lot of parikramas in your life. I've seen the videos. So how I can or we can convince myself to take the parikrama, because it's a very painful process. It is by walking. So please tell something, Maharaj.
Well, you don't have to walk. You don't have to walk. We understand that not everybody can walk. And I think this year we're not going to do a lot of walking also. Mostly we'll be traveling on boats or by vehicles, I think, because we're only going out for 5 days, so we won't be doing a lot of walking. But, parikrama, the idea is to come and hear about the holy place. The walking part is not so important. You don't worry about that. If you want to, there'll be autos and rickshaws and things there. They're always there, they're happy, they get some business, they can make some money, And we don't mind, nobody's going to complain, oh, what are you doing, you have to walk. No. Our parikramas are quite relaxed. You want to ride in a rickshaw, no problem. We're happy you come. Just come along and hear the kathas. That's the real purpose. Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki. Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur. Srila Prabhupada ki.